Welcome to Chicks Who Fly, a podcast dedicated to women pilots and women in aviation. My name is Anaya, and I am your host. I am a vocalist, a DJ, and a producer, and I'm also a student pilot. I am currently working on my private pilot certificate, and while I am getting some finances in place to finish my training, I have decided to stay active in the aviation community by starting this podcast, among other things. I plan to interview and feature different women pilots and women in aviation and bring those interviews to you. And hopefully you guys enjoy the interviews as much as I enjoy spending time with these amazing ladies. In today's 14th episode of Chicks Who Fly, I get to have a conversation with Sammi McQ. Sammi is a private pilot with an instrument rating who started flying while she was in high school, shortly after her dad accidentally purchased an airplane. Sammi is currently working on her commercial certificate. In this conversation, Sammi and I discuss the challenges she faced during her instrument training, the impact of an incompatible flight instructor on her training process, the cool way she learned to always hit her weight when performing steep turns, her aviation bucket list, and taking the FAA written exam in the midst of pandemic-related closures. We compare her experience at a Part 61 versus Part 141 flight school, and Sammi also shares her experience volunteering at an event where little girls were being taken up for their very first flight. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube, as well as sharing with all your friends who might enjoy this podcast as well. Also, if you would like to be more intimately involved with the creation of this podcast, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon at Chicks Who Fly. You can reach us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com and on our website, chickswhofly.com. Thank you so much once again. This was a really fun conversation for me, so I hope you enjoy the interview that I got to do with Sammi McQ. Hi Sammi, welcome. I'm super pumped to have you here on Chicks Who Fly. How's it going today?
It's going great. I'm super excited to get to talk to you today.
I'm so excited to get to share everybody's aviation story. So, with that said, what made you choose aviation and how did you get started?
So I got started in high school. My first flight was the day before my 18th birthday, actually. So my dad had always wanted to fly, and so when I was in high school, he was finally able to kind of pursue that, and he got his private pilot certificate, and then shortly after he accidentally bought an airplane, and which helped me out, but it was my junior year in high school, and my teachers, they always tell all the kids, okay, you need to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And me being a 17-year-old had no idea, but I was like, well, I have this airplane at my disposal. Maybe I can fly. So I spent my senior year flying, got, I think about 27 hours in that year, and ended up going to Central Washington University, where I got my private pilot certificate and my instrument rating before I ended up switching majors due to a few complications along the way. Yeah, that's where I got my start.
That's very cool, but of course I can't let it pass. I have to ask, how does one accidentally buy an airplane?
That's like the most common question I get after telling like that part of the story. He and my mom had gone to like, I think it was an estate sale, it was an estate sale, and parts of it were like a silent auction. So he saw that there was, you know, an airplane and all the contents of a hangar of this guy that had passed away, and he put down some bid that he was like, oh, I'll get outbid, like it's worth more than this. And he didn't get outbid, so he bought an airplane.
Amazing. What kind of airplane was it?
So it is a 1970 Cessna 172. It's my baby too.
Amazing. Does it have a name?
I've recently started calling it the Queen. I've been calling her the Queen. But I don't think she has an official name. Her call sign is 86 Delta Bravo, so a lot of times we just call her Delta Bravo.
Very cool. Some name will stick eventually, I think, but I like the Queen. Yeah. And of course the call sign is always a good thing to call your airplane.
Mm-hmm.
So you trained in your 172 that your dad got?
Yeah, so through high school, that's what I was training in. And then when I went to college, I went through their flight program. I used their planes there. So I was flying 152s for my private, and then we flew Piper Warriors for my instrument.
Oh, cool. Do you have a preference between low wing and high wing?
I'm kind of a Cessna girl just because that's what I'm like most familiar with. I've flown a few low wings over the years, and I have nothing against them, but Cessnas kind of just have a little piece of my heart.
Yeah, I understand that, especially since it's your own airplane. So once you went away to school and started training, and throughout your whole training process, what were some of the first challenges that you encountered, or the biggest?
So I think that during my private year, I didn't really have a lot of challenges that year. I think the biggest one was that going into college, I kind of had to start at square one because it's a 141 school, and my previous training hadn't been 141.
Right.
So I had to start over. So I ended up with my private pilot at about just under 100 hours, which is kind of high for a private, but got that done. And then my instrument year, I really, really struggled with my instrument rating. I talked to a bunch of people in my program at the time, and I just remember them saying, yeah, I struggled for a while, and then one day it just clicked. And I feel like that's what I always hear about instrument ratings is one day it just clicked. And I never really felt like it did click with me. It got to be close to the end of the school year, and I hadn't completed my instrument rating. And I mean, I think that there were various factors in that. I think one of them, which I've heard you talk about with some of your other guests on the podcast too, is I think I had an incompatible flight instructor, and nothing against him, nothing against the flight school, nothing like that. But I think that we just didn't work that well together. He wasn't what I needed to learn that skill. And I feel like that got discovered too late. And by the time they kind of caught on how much I was struggling, I was so far behind that I wasn't really able to catch back up. And so that's when I left the program. And it kind of turned me off flying for a long time after that, actually. I started working on my commercial that summer, but my heart wasn't in it. I was really tired of flying. I didn't really enjoy it much. And up until probably last year, I hadn't flown anything instrument approach, nothing. I hadn't used my IFR ratings since the day I got it. But I think over the course, so I was looking through my logbook to kind of look at my hours. I took a long break from flying. So from between 2011 and 2017, I only have 11 hours logged because I just wasn't flying at all. I I've been working office jobs here and there, like office jobs for what I actually ended up majoring in. And I ended up at my current job, which I don't think I can actually say the name of the company, but I work for a well-known company that makes training and navigation supplies for pilots that's owned by a much larger aviation conglomerate, which should pretty much give it away if people look into it. But being surrounded by a lot of pilots there has kind of reignited the spark in me, and so over the last 2 or 3 years I've kind of started trying to fly again, and I've picked up my commercial pilot training, and yeah, I kind of lost track of what the original question was.
I just went on the trip with you. Basically, I asked you what were some of the challenges, and I hear from a lot of people the same thing, that instrument was like a foreign language, and suddenly one day it clicked. And I do sometimes worry that it just won't for me.
Yeah. I've talked to a few younger pilots too, and or like I've made some friends with girls who are going through it more recently, and my biggest advice is just if it's not clicking, try going up with another instructor, because it's such a difficult thing to learn that I feel like having that compatibility and having a person who can like teach it to you in a way that you will learn it is really, really important.
Yeah. I didn't realize how incompatible that instructor and I were until I didn't fly with somebody else. It was, I was too new. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what is a normal pace, what's a normal pace of learning. Everything was just so new. And then because sometimes with some of the instructors, there was some personalities involved as far as, I've mentioned that one of my instructors, he just always seemed like he wanted to show how much he knows, which he is super, super knowledgeable, but kind of like, it seems like he's trying to make you see how much he knows and how much you don't. And for me, it's like, look, I already know I don't know shit, you know? It's like, if you think that you need to put me in my place, I guarantee you I'm there. I know. I know nothing. So could you please tell me how the hell to do this maneuver? You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's what it came down to, too. I was like 19 or 20 at the time. It's like I didn't know, like you said, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, I mean, I think that that's something that, I mean, not just my flight school, but all flight schools should be a little bit better at recognizing. Like, if you see a student isn't progressing as quickly as they maybe should be, like, maybe check in on that.
Yeah. What ratings do you have now, and what are you working on? And then that's, in the context of that, I wanted to know who you've gotten to fly with that you did feel that was a particularly good match, if you've had anyone like that. Sorry, I know that's a lot of questions in one.
That's okay. So I have my pilot certificate and instrument rating. I'm currently working on my commercial. I'm at a point now, I've taken the written. At this point, I'm kind of just waiting for a lot of this pandemic stuff to clear up so I can find a DPE to fly with. And let's see. Actually, my very first flight instructor, he was fresh out of college, and he was just like full of energy, just wanted to fly. He knew his stuff. He was just go, go, go. And he pushed me really far in it. He taught me, which was actually kind of a fun skill to bring to college, he taught me how to do steep turns looking completely outside the airplane and then go all the way around and then hit my wake at the other side, which is like it's like the goal of that one. Like, most people don't do it, but if you can go all the way around and hit your wake, it means you did a perfect circle and remained at the same altitude.
Yeah. I've managed to do that before, and and then other times I just can't. But so he taught you to do this.
So he taught me to do it without looking at any of the instruments. He was like, I want you to learn how to do this looking outside the plane. And so he would cover up my panel, and we would just do steep turns on steep turns on steep turns. And so when I went to college and it came time to start doing steep turns with my instructor there, I was like, oh, I got this. Watch. And so I did it, and I hit my wake, and he's like, whoa, I've never seen anybody actually, like, do that, like, on command. So he was a really good instructor. I kind of hopped around with a lot of other instructors. I had two main instructors in college. One was the one that I think I just wasn't compatible with. The other one, he was a very good instructor, too. I've really only flown with male instructors for the most part. My best friend is a CFI, and I've done some flying with her, but not a lot. She hasn't done any of my long-term training yet. We'll see what happens.
Cool. Well, and what's your goal? You're working on your commercial. Do you want to do this for a career?
I do. I'm really tired of sitting in an office and staring at a computer all day. My short-term goal is to finish up my commercial and then basically take whatever comes my way, wherever the wind takes me. I'm open to cargo. I'm open to ferrying. I'm open to anything, really. I've been looking into a lot of different options that I have, but I guess we'll just see where the universe takes me. My long-term goal is I would love to go fly for an airline in Europe. I have dual citizenship, American and Irish, and so with that EU citizenship, there's a part of me that really doesn't want to let that go to waste, and so I'd love to convert my FAA licenses to European licenses and be able to go fly over there.
You know, I'm really glad you said that. I saw the Irish flag on your Instagram where you were mentioning that you have dual citizenship. My husband is from Argentina, and he also has a Polish passport. So I've wondered about converting even just to something in South America. I don't know how the certificates and laws work in South America, but I do remember having a conversation with an airport manager at one of the airports where I flew in Los Angeles, and he's from South America, and he was telling me there's so much demand and that it would be such a good idea to go try to fly in South America.
I was just saying, I don't know much about the South American conversions. I know the European conversions are difficult. I think that from what I've heard, I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard that the European certificates are just a lot more strict. So I know the FAA to the European ones is a little difficult, but I don't know about South America. Maybe it wouldn't be that bad.
That's what I wondered, because I have heard the same thing from European pilots that I know. So what is it that you ended up majoring in?
So I ended up with a bachelor's degree in geography with a GIS focus. So it's GIS is Geographic Information Systems, and so it's mapping data. So anytime you see any map that is showing any sort of statistic over an area, like you'll see ones where it's like the populations by county or something like that. That's GIS. That's a very simple way of using the program and the analysis, but that is a form of GIS. So out of college, I worked for Google Maps as a contractor for about a year and a half, and then ended up at a GIS firm in downtown Seattle. And then at my current job, where I'm using GIS to make the navigation data.
That was super cool, and there's a relationship, obviously. So.
Mhm.
Are there any fun flights that you have on your bucket list?
Ooh. I mean, one day I definitely want to fly to Oshkosh. I mean, I think that's on every pilot's bucket list if they haven't done it already, and it's probably still on their bucket list if they have. I went for the first time in 2017 and haven't been back since, but I decided that I'm going to do it someday to fly in there.
Yeah, I've heard that also.
Yeah, I guess I want to fly everywhere. I don't really have anything specific, but like open to opportunities, I guess.
Cool. I can relate to that. And the COVID situation accelerated and made some of our plans morph a lot. So we've literally gone from the Joshua Tree, where we wanted to build container houses and an airstrip, to now we don't even see ourselves staying here so much. We want to do a lot more traveling, so we've decided we actually moved into an RV, and we want to drive our tiny house on wheels to the East Coast and buy a boat to live aboard. And before we set sail for anywhere, I want to have my private and instrument at the very least. And I'm really interested in getting a seaplane rating and, you know, after I have my commercial, so that it just is automatically a commercial seaplane.
Definitely. Yeah, I've been holding off on all the additional ones till after I get my commercial. I've done a little bit of multi-engine work. I've done a little bit of seaplane work. But those are both ones that I really, really want to do after my commercial. You were talking about how COVID has affected you, and I mean, I feel like it's almost kind of motivated me in a way. I had kind of been putting off taking my written for so long, and when this whole pandemic hit, I'm like, well, I need to take my written now. Like, what if all of the testing facilities close? So I scheduled it. I think I had gotten back to Colorado from visiting my parents, and I scheduled it like the day I got back or the next day for like a couple days later, and then the place that I was going to take it at shut down. And I was like, oh no. And so I went and I searched for another place, and I called them. I'm like, are you guys going to stay open? Like, is there any chance you're closing? Like, I really want to take this test. I just want to get it done. But I don't want to book it if you guys are just going to shut down in the next couple of days. And he's like, no, we're planning on staying open as long as possible, so go ahead. So I got that done really quick, and so I'm glad that that's out of the way, and yeah.
Well, good for you. How did you find the test? How did you feel?
How did I feel after it?
Yeah, like how was it easy? Was it challenging? Was it stressful?
I had been studying for it for way longer than I probably should have been. So I felt fairly confident going into it. Once I got it done, it was just relief. It just felt so relieved to have that step done. It's kind of been interesting working towards my commercial because I did my private and my instrument part 141, and I'm doing this part 61. I'm so used to having these very rigorous schedules and deadlines and someone pushing me at all times to keep going. And it's hard to find that in a part 61 training. So there's this part of me that just never quite feels prepared. I'm adjusting to it.
Are you pretty good at being self-motivated and creating structure for yourself?
I am terrible at it. That's been one of my big problems is I just kept being like, oh yeah, I'll get to it. And then I would study a little here, study a little there. And so last fall I sat down and I made myself a schedule. I was like, you're going to read this chapter in this book and this chapter in this book, and you're going to have it all done by this date. And I broke it down and had it set up to be done by the end of the year. because I'm so bad at self-motivating, it definitely got pushed a little, but I did get it done in March. Like, I took the test in March, so I wasn't too far off, a couple months.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I'm having kind of the opposite problem. Like, when I was getting ready to, like, just go all the way to the check ride, I scheduled several lessons, and then that's when COVID hit, and I lost all my income, so I had to cancel my lessons. And if I had started at that time, I would have been good, pretty safe to be able to be ready for my check ride before my written exam for the private pilot certificate expires. And now I don't know if they're going to extend that. I know they're extending some deadlines. They haven't said anything about that. And my test will expire in January. And so hopefully I can get flying before then. I'm working on it. I was pretty discouraged when it all first happened, just because I didn't know it hit me. But,
yeah, I know. It's been rough.
Yeah. I don't want to jinx myself, but I feel like I'm getting my bearings a little bit and starting to see the ways in which it could be possible for me to get there. So we'll see.
They've been extending. I mean, they extended the medical, and there was another thing they extended recently. The flight reviews. They're extending those a little bit too. Sounds like they're being understanding of it.
Yeah, it does sound that way. Hopefully I can get it done before it expires. Otherwise, I'm going to feel pressure to get 100%, you know?
I had to come to terms with just not worrying about the score. I mean, in the end, it matters whether or not you pass. And I mean, if you pass, you pass, and no, future job is going to be like, what was your score on your private pilot written test?
Also, your private pilot or even your ATP certificate won't say that you graduated from Embry-Riddle or that you did it in your little Part 61 school. I understand about the whole Part 141 thing. When I was first trying to figure out which way to go, I went and I saw a school in Bakersfield that is a Part 141, and it was so structured to the point where Spanish is my first language. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and they wanted to force me to take a Spanish class. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. It's like, I could teach your Spanish class. What are you talking about? What do you mean I can't test out of this, even? So
yeah, that seems a little strange.
It seemed pretty rigid, and it ended up just not working out for a few reasons. But my husband was willing to go move to Bakersfield, which is really, really different. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's small, it's different. Some parts seem to be like really stuck in time, like you're in a staged main street or something like that. It's quaint. I don't know, but it's very different from what we're used to, and he was willing to do that, so I know he loves me.
Oh, yeah, that can be quite the culture shock. I mean, I'm from a fairly small town originally, and I went to school. Central Washington University is in a pretty small town, and I had friends there that came from Seattle, and it was quite the culture shock for them coming from, big-ish city Seattle to Cowtown, USA.
It must be cool flying there, though. You must have some scenic views.
Yeah, I mean, the mountains around here are so beautiful. I love flying around. So I'm temporarily relocated up in Washington. I'm staying with my parents, just kind of waiting out all of this and trying to get some flight hours in. And it's beautiful to fly around up here. There's a ton of islands and mountains, and it's really pretty. It's just the weather doesn't always agree.
Yeah, I bet it's important to get your instrument quickly.
Yeah, I know. I really should probably work on doing an IPC and get that recurrent, but my dad's plane isn't currently, it's IFR capable, but it hasn't been like brought up to date, I don't think, in the time that he's owned it, so it wouldn't do me a whole lot of good right now anyway.
Right. I understand. I really would love to buy a plane and everything, but I don't know where I will eventually end up.
Sometimes you just gotta trust that the universe has a plan and just go with it.
Yeah, and you know, the pressure is good for you. You find out who you are.
Mhm. I learn a lot from those situations.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you start to, if things are stressful in your life, and how you react to that is very indicative of how you will react in an emergency in like a plane. I feel like I've been lucky enough so far, knock on wood, to have not had any emergencies, but I'd like to think that I would react the same as I do in most stressful situations. Try to keep my cool and keep going.
Yeah, and I think it teaches you, studying aviation and doing flight training teaches you how to stay calm in other situations in life, so.
Definitely.
What is that? Do you have some kind of involvement that you see aviation having in the community that you're like, oh my God, that's so cool, or I'd like to be a part of that?
So there's a lot of things that I want to be a part of. I mean, I feel like I've heard a few of your guests talk about pilots and pause. I would love to get involved with that. My dad just got a new interior in the plane, so he said no dogs in the plane, but someday I would love to get involved in that one. And there's a lot of those volunteer opportunities. I think 2 years ago I was involved with, it was an organization called Fly Wow. It was Worldwide Aviation, WAOW, I believe. Anyways, it was trying to get young girls involved with flying. And so it was a whole week of pilots donating their time in their airplane to take as many little girls. It was open to little boys too, but it was definitely more focused towards little girls, up on their first flight or just a flight to get them interested in aviation. And it happened in several locations around the world. And if I remember right, that year our location got the most first flights, which was really cool. Yeah, I was on the ground helping out with that one, but it was really cool to see all the little kids come back, and they were so excited, and watching their faces light up about aviation was really cool.
Yeah, being a part of somebody's first flight has got to be a very special feeling, for sure.
Yeah, it is. I've taken a few friends up for their first time in like a small plane. The thing that always kind of makes me laugh, and me and my dad have talked about this a few times because he notices it too. He's like, the first time someone's in a plane, you know, it doesn't matter if in normal life they're like the most talkative person you've ever met. Once you're up in the air and they're looking down, they're just in awe and are silent the rest of the flight just because they're just so awestruck by it. It's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, it was definitely that way for me. I haven't yet given anyone their first time, but eventually my day will come to expose people.
You will get there.
Yeah, I'm starting to see it now. It's pretty surreal what we're living.
Yeah, it is. And there's part of me that's a little thankful too, though, that I didn't get through my commercial sooner, because I probably would have left my job and I probably would have been, you know, really low on the totem pole at some airline and probably wouldn't have a job right now. So there's a little bit of a silver lining in my procrastinating.
Yes, that helps make a case for your procrastination, for sure.
Yeah.
And I know that the way that a lot of people are adapting is turning their passenger flights into cargo flights because the demand for transportation of things has gone up because nobody can go anywhere. So
yeah, cargo is still booming for sure. Makes a little bit of a case for wanting to pursue a cargo job, but those might be getting taken at this point.
Yeah, one of the coolest interviews that I did that I was like the most amazed at the stuff that I was hearing was Cheryl Pitzer, who has been a captain for FedEx for 24 years. And I don't know if you got to hear her episode, but she talks about flying whales and dolphins. You know.
I know, that's so crazy. I've heard stories about flying animals. I heard one story about someone flying. It was like a third-hand story, but a story about someone flying a load of penguins. And in my head, I just really imagine them not in cages and just wandering around the back of this plane and every now and then poking their head into the cockpit. I know that's not what it was, but I really like to imagine it that way.
I like your version. I'll sign up for that too. Yeah, I love animals. Whatever I do has to somehow merge music, aviation, and animals because I would feel incomplete without them.
Yeah, I know. I have a cat, and I would love to take him flying at some point, but I'm not sure how he would do in a plane.
Oh my God, what kind of cat do you have?
He's white and fluffy, and his name is Cirrus. Like the clouds. I call him my cloud kitty.
Oh, that's amazing. We have 3 cats, and one of them is a tripod. Oh, well, one is an orange 3-legged guy that we rescued. He had been hit by a car, and we found him in our parking lot, and very close to death, and we took him in, and we did a GoFundMe, and all I could feel when I saw his little face under the car, like all battered and in really terrible shape, was, I want you to have a warm belly to sleep on.
Yeah.
One day we'll have to see how they do in our planes.
Yeah, he does okay in the car, but I feel like the loud noises of the plane might be a little much for him. He's actually extremely friendly. When he first meets someone, he might hide for maybe 5 minutes, but then he's like, okay, well, that's a new person that'll pet me, so he'll come back and say hi.
Yeah, Mr. G is like that. But yeah, I was surprised. Chloe used to have a brother from the same litter, and they flew, like an American Airlines with me from Miami to Paris. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised at how it was like nothing was happening for them. And, the jets are pretty loud too, and I had been worried about that. So.
Yeah, I've come across a few cats on airline flights. They usually do okay. I'm usually surprised.
Yeah, they adapt like we do, I suppose. But anyway, let me see. What can I ask you? I totally got distracted talking about cats.
That's fine. Cats are fun too. I think the other aviation community that I think that is really cool is the flights above. And they have their own hashtags on Instagram. I've met the guy that started that one. He's up here in Washington. I think he flies out of the same airport as me. So there's different regions around the U.S. and they have flights above the Pacific Northwest, flights above the Pacific Southwest. That's a really cool one to check out. At least the Pacific Northwest one does a lot of fly-ins all summer. And they'll do a lot of hey, we're all taking off out of here and we're going to go fly here and you should come along. And that's a really cool one. And just on Instagram, I've met one of my pilot friends through Instagram. We ended up liking each other's pictures and we started messaging and it turned out we were flying out of the same airport and we're like, And I think that same day that we started messaging, she was like, hey, I'm going on a hike later. You should come with me. And I'm like, okay. So we went hiking together, and now we're friends. And it never hurts to reach out and say hi to other pilots.
No, that's true. I was pleasantly surprised that everyone I reached out to in the past couple of days got back to me, and pretty quickly. I love the support of the women in aviation. Like, it's just a privilege to be a part of the community. And this is a common thread whenever I interview people, and even that I notice in my life when I'm not feeling good and my head isn't in the game, I notice I've been isolating myself. And in aviation, there's so many ways to connect with people that you really don't have to do that. Why do we do that to ourselves?
Yeah, and I mean, even in aviation, even if you're flying by yourself, you can still connect with other pilots. You can, like, go fly somewhere with them, like, both in your own plane. Like, you can still socially distance and be social with aviation, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's true. And different states are going at different paces. Like, yesterday, I interviewed someone who's in Texas, and they're starting to open up, and I don't know what everything is going to look like, but it's good that there are different versions of activities that you can do while distancing that involve aviation.
Definitely. Yeah, I think Colorado flight schools are starting to open back up from what I've been seeing. I know a friend that I have there that's studying, she said her flight school opened back up. The one that I was renting from, I know they opened back up. I don't think they're opening up back in Washington quite yet, but I'm not really in the loop with that, so I'm not 100% sure.
I know that the schools in Santa Monica are already going, like here in LA, I believe. I heard that. And then I went to the airport out here. I'm over in San Gabriel Valley for the moment, and the little local airport here was closed, and they had a COVID-19 testing center set up in the parking lot. So when I jogged over there, just because I was jonesing for airplanes so badly, but I was happy to just jog by the freaking airport.
So you took that picture that's on Instagram of all the pretty planes on the ramp?
Yes. It's new to me to live out here. I've just been here since we moved into the trailer because we're waiting for parks to open up. We're actually staying in my cousin's backyard, which is a great way to break into it because we're down to do this and we're excited for the adventure, but we're total newbies.
That's awesome, though. I'm sure there's quite the learning curve. I mean, just like aviation, I'm sure there's quite a learning curve with it.
I was meaning to ask you, was there ever a moment in your training where you kind of scared yourself and then learned something from that?
I can't think of a moment in particular where I actually scared myself. A few things have kind of happened along those lines where I've always had kind of a little bit of a fear of talking on the radio, at controlled airports, and that's kind of been one of my struggles through most of training. And so when I started back up my training in Colorado a couple years ago, I made sure to do it out of a controlled airport because I had never been based out of a controlled airport. I was always at uncontrolled. But I think one of the things that has helped me is actually making mistakes on the radio because it happens and then you go, oh, nothing bad actually happened and we all move on and it's not that big of a deal. That type of stuff has helped. During my private, I was struggling with stalls for some reason. I would get scared when I was stalled because I was so afraid of going into a spin. And so my instructor took me up. I think he had to get permission to do it, but he took me up and we climbed way, 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 way up above the airport and he put it into a spin just so I could see what a spin was and what the plane did. And that was eye-opening in that it's not the end of the world. And, the spin recovery that you have memorized, it works. And I don't know, there's a part of me that thinks that you should see a spin during your private year, but I know that a lot of places won't do that.
I've heard about classes like upset training where you learn the way that you practice a stall during flight training is not the way a stall happens in real life. So it becomes, I think, a little difficult for newer pilots to recognize a stall if it's really happening because it's not the same way.
Oh, definitely. I would love to do like more aerobatics stuff just to kind of see what the planes are capable of. I've done a couple of aerobatic flights, but I just want to learn everything there is to learn. I would love to do my aerobatic stuff. I really want to take a mountain flying class because there's a lot of those around. I would also love to learn how to fly a glider because I've heard a lot of stories about glider pilots, either people that are trained on both or like a glider pilot that's going for their airplane rating, and just the knowledge that gliders have about thermals and like airflows and how to keep themselves aloft for hours on end with no engine. Learning all of that stuff can help you be a better pilot in anything that you fly.
I have heard examples of people who've had in-flight emergencies, but because they had either tailwheel or glider or seaplane experience, those three types of flying seem to really increase people's capability of responding to in-flight emergencies.
Definitely. Or just any sort of flying in Alaska. That'll help too.
Yes, I hear it's a crazy beautiful place to get a seaplane rating.
That's what I hear too. I've visited a few times and been on a couple small planes up there, but I would love to actually fly up there. I guess it makes you a real pilot real quick.
Yeah, I like that about learning to fly in Los Angeles. My experience is the opposite of you and most people in that I always was based out of controlled airports, and I was nervous and like, what's that going to be like self-announcing and interacting on the radio in an uncontrolled airport. And then when I moved to Palm Springs, it was my first time flying out of an uncontrolled airport, and it was, I think, almost just as challenging just because it's the unfamiliarity that makes it challenging.
Definitely. There are definitely two different beasts. I've grown more comfortable with controlled airports just because it's kind of nice to have someone, looking out for you, making sure you're not going to hit anyone else. And the airport I fly out of up here in Washington is a madhouse on sunny days, especially like sunny weekend days. Like there are two runways there, and one of them is like big and wide and nice, and everybody loves to land on that runway. I love to land on that runway. Everyone does. But every so often the wind goes down the other runway, and you'll have people taking off and landing, so in the pattern for both runways. And then, like, on occasion when the wind is, like, light and variable, you'll get people that are taking off opposite ends of the runway. Like, uncontrolled airports are crazy at times. This one in particular is extremely busy. It would probably be a good candidate for a tower, but I think that most of the people that fly out of there would leave if they put up a tower. We get a lot of fair weather flyers. Don't really want to talk to anyone. They just want to go buzz around and fly their airplane and not be bothered. So the other thing we get at that airport is you'll get, someone makes a radio call and you'll hear someone else go, "Oh, hey, Bob, is that you? Oh, I haven't seen you in ages." And they just start having a conversation and you're like, I kind of have to make a call that I'm about to land. Please stop.
Yes, that totally happens. Because I was working at an FBO when the COVID stuff hit. At that uncontrolled airport that I was flying out of, I had gotten a job at the FBO. I've seen, like, cowboys that just don't feel like talking, and just want to fly in. I've also seen people that I thought that's what was happening, but then I realized they were doing an overfly and then getting into a pattern and they had lost calm. I one time saw one guy was announcing and I was talking to him on the Unicom, and when he was landing, this other guy just landed on the opposite runway, like head on, and the pilot that I was talking to caught it in time and did a very loud go around, but avoided an incursion.
I had one of those last year. I took my grandma flying, and it was my first time taking her flying, and it was one of the days where the wind was kind of, light and variable, and so when I checked, the wind was down 1/6, and so I went and lined up on 1/6, but, it was so calm that, it was kind of fluctuating between being right down 1/6 and calm. And so the calm runway is 3-4, so at the opposite end, and a couple of us had been lined up for 1/6, and so someone took off in front of me, and I make my call. I'm like, hey, I'm taking runway 1/6, and I take off. We start our takeoff roll. We take off. We're climbing, and then out of nowhere, I see this plane coming straight at me, and I said some words I shouldn't have said in front of my grandma. And I did the, turn to the right and dive to get away from this guy. And had my grandma not been there, I probably would have had some choice words for him on the radio, but he had made no calls. He obviously wasn't listening to the radio. What are you doing?
Some people behave that way and then they ruin it for other people. Because that sounds like it was scary for you as the pilot, and it was scary for me to watch, the version that happened over there. So
people need to listen to what the local traffic is doing. I think that a lot of people come in there and they're like, oh, it's calm. The calm runway is 3-4, and they just assume. You need to listen to what other people are doing, because there's other people doing things, and that affects what you're doing.
Yes, you're not flying out there by yourself.
Yeah, no. There's not a lot to hit, but there are a few things.
Yes, and we'd like to avoid that. That's always preferable.
Yes.
Well, I have 2 more questions for you. One is, what is your favorite thing about being a pilot?
I enjoy the freedom of being able to just go places. So at least flying up here in Washington, there's a bunch of islands that you can fly to. And if you can't fly to them, you can take the ferries, you can get out there other ways. But it takes hours to drive to the ferry, wait to get on the ferry, the ferry goes out to the island. It takes forever. It's beautiful. It's fun to do, but it takes a long time. Whereas with access to a plane, I can go to the airport, pre-flight, get it all ready, be up there in 20 minutes, walk into town, go get lunch, walk back to the plane, fly home, and I could do all that in less time than it would take to drive and take the ferry there. So I love the freedom of being able to just go places quicker.
Definitely flying is way quicker than a ferry.
Yeah.
We have Catalina Island. It's the same thing. And I guess the last question that I have for you is, do you have any advice for student pilots or people who are thinking about getting into flight training?
I think that my number one advice, which we talked about earlier, is just make sure that you're compatible with your instructor. And I've heard a lot of your guests, say the same thing. It's really, really important, because it can kind of affect the way you think that you fly. So it can get in your head and make you think you're a bad pilot when you're not. You're just not being taught the way you need to be taught. And just keep going, even if you end up taking breaks and there's setbacks and everything. If it's really what you want to do, just keep going. I came back to it after 6 years of just barely flying. I'm loving it. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, That sounds like it feels good. I hope to join you soon.
I'm sure I'll see you up there someday soon.
Yeah, things are lining up. I'm excited to get back up there soon. Holy Prue, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me and sharing your story. It was really cool.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us here at Chicks Who Fly. We really enjoy doing this podcast for you. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube, as well as sharing with all your friends who might enjoy this podcast as well. Also, if you would like to be more intimately involved with the creation of this podcast, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon at Chicks Who Fly. You can reach us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com and on our website, chickswhofly.com. Thank you so much once again, and we look forward to spending some more time with you on the next episode of Chicks Who Fly.